So also for the speakers. So you have to select English for English or Spanish for Italian. Most of the webinar will be in Italian today, okay? We will take photos and we will record, and we will also have a live Facebook. So if you don't want to appear, please close your webcam, but I hope that you don't, because you are so nice. Buonasera, buon pomeriggio, buona mattina a tutte. Io sono Patrizia Morgante della UISG e tra pochi minuti iniziamo. È necessario che selezionate la lingua in basso, nel bottone Interpretation dovete selezionare per l'italiano, dovete selezionare spagnolo. Siamo, diciamo, a posto e lascio la parola a Suor Pina Ricceri.
I would like to give the floor now to Pina Ricceri for the moderation of this meeting. I would like to welcome everyone. Welcome, first of all. Also, I see only one man who is connected so far, and this is the last appointment of our webinars with the goal to deepen the message of Pope Francis for the 54th Day of Social Communications that we celebrated last Sunday for the Solemn of Ascension. So this webinar is the collaboration of UISG, the International Union of Superiors General, the Dicastery of Communication, and the Italian Union of Major Superiors in Italy. I am Pina Ricceri. I am a Pauline sister, and I represent the Communication Office of the Union of Major Superior and in Italy. And the topic that I would like to remember is exactly that life becomes story, as Pope Francis says. And from this message of Pope Francis, we had these 3 webinars. This one we have today is the last one. And the topic is that we are stories on social media. I can see that many in the audience are English speaking, and so welcome to you as well. And I think also I see many young faces because this is a topic that is specifically of interest for young generations. But before presenting the topic and introducing the speakers for today, I would like to give the floor to Mother Yvonne, who is the Superior General of the Daughters of Mary, Help of Christians, Salesian, and also the President of our USMI, the Union of Major Superiors in Italy. So Mother Yvonne, welcome, and I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Sister Pina. I'm very glad, and I would like to welcome everyone who is connected today as we gather today from different parts of the world. And I was reflecting that actually this time, which is characterized by lockdown and many preventive measures, anyway, we are able to shorten distances through our communication. And therefore, we are able to feel the need of more relation, starting from our heart. And therefore, welcome everyone, and I hope that this meeting will be a meeting that will shorten distances for everybody. So I am particularly glad for having been able to realize this collaboration between UISG and USMI in these 3 meetings, starting from Pope Francis' message. And I hope that we will be having other initiatives in the future. As I often say, together is a magic word, and therefore I think this is really a support for everybody. And for sure I can say that the topic of the message for Social Communication Day is beautiful. And this year we heard that you might tell children and grandchildren, life becomes story. And this is so real and so true for our story, which is the story of our faith, of the people of God. And today the topic is weaving stories on social media. And of course, this is a reflection that is very much needed. And I am thankful for this choice. For many of us is new and is something that allows us to have new energies in our communities and congregations. And even through this lockdown, we were able to log in more in social media and the virtual environment, despite being prepared or not. And this is a great opportunity that for sure will be leading us towards new paths in this sense. And it will be a renewal opportunity. And so this participation, the dialogue between present and past, and showing the future as well, our expectations, we feel the need, as I believe, to also be prepared in order to enter this new mentality, since getting in contact through these means of communication is not only a technical issue, is also an issue of being open-minded and change our scheme. It is not easy for us, as we were not born, some of us at least, in the digital era, but for sure we know that this is a challenge and we are helping each other together with the announcement of the gospel, the message of the gospel. We want to transmit the messages of our charisms as stories of generations through the generations, for the daughters of our daughters as well, as a living story which is able to generate new life and the seed of a new life for the future. And many in over these months, we entered these channels to try to keep living dialogue and announcing the gospel. And I think it is shocking the number of communications that have been created, many means to ask for prayers and also to feel in relation. And if we had the opportunity to tell stories, if we had the time now, it would be great. But of course, this time is limited. Anyhow, we are in this situation where we are able to tell stories on social media with our passion, because social media are the possibility for a multiplier element and also for a contagion of good stories, stories of life, as we know that life is generated through life. Therefore, telling stories, telling life is generating new life. And we as women, I believe we are all women here, I don't know, but anyway, this is a very particular, important topic that interests us as the fecundity of our relations. So therefore, I thank you for this opportunity that I could welcome everyone, and also for organizing these three webinars that I was and I am happy to partake part in. And I would like to thank all the speakers of all the different webinars, and also Patrizia Morgante, who is always present and is helping through the organization. Every time that I see a communication coming from UISG, I see, oh, something new, really. We are always learning something new. And this is very special. And I ensure everyone the communion and my joy for the opportunity to be here together with you today. And I hope that also we see the relation among our charism, and that can generate new life in religious life, starting from religious life within society and the church. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you, Mother Yvonne, for this beautiful message. And even if it was short, it was very rich in terms of perspectives, and you also reminded us very important steps, especially in formation. So being on social media is not only a technical aspect, because it concerns education and formation. And also, as you reminded us, the need of being near to each other. As we saw through this time, these many initiatives, thanks to UISG as well, we were able to use this opportunity, even if we are physically distant. And thank you also for the time, your availability, because I know that in a short time you will have another meeting, and therefore thank you for joining us, Mother Yvonne. So, after this short introduction by Mother Yvonne, I would like to introduce a little bit our speakers for today. And we have Professor Michele Casella, who is in Caserta, and Professor Dr. Patrizia Morgante, who is very well known. And even through this webinar, we will have, after the presentation, some questions. And we know that this topic is so important for us, as storytelling is essential, is something that is interesting in us. And before giving them the floor, I would like to briefly introduce them. First of all, I introduce Professor Michele Casella. He is a professor of Italian, Latin, and Greek, and he's a storyteller, a real storyteller. He's graduated in classical literature, and he has also a diploma in Master in International Screenwriting and Production. And after the stage acting, he worked for theaters, and he also ideator and creator of several publishing projects for children, which concern true stories. And he is also the director of a publishing also initiative for Edizioni Pauline, and this is a publishing house with which he worked for theatrical texts for children. He also writes, produces, and directs theater shows, and he holds formation courses for storytelling for professors and other professionals. And as he's always in constant movement, and he's very active, we can say, and he's really someone who is constantly moving and is enthusiastic for his profession and for what he chose to give others. And thank you, Michele, for this attitude. And I would like to say something on Patrizia Morgante. Even if you know her very well, she is digital communicator, professional educator, formator, and consultant for communication, facilitator, and also as a lay woman. For 20 years, she's been working in the field of communication for women religious. And right now, she is the communication officer of UISG. She is a pillar for the communication office, and she is constantly searching and looking for new opportunities and new ideas. This is something that is really is peculiar in Patrizia. And before giving the floor to Michele, I would like to introduce a little bit the topic that we have today: weaving stories on social media. And this is an expression that we find in Pope Francis' message. And this message says, we weave not only clothing, but also stories. Indeed, the human capacity to weave gives us not only the word textile, but also text. And in his message, Pope Francis is offering us a perspective to understand storytelling, which is based on memory, on a living story. And also, Pope Francis adds, human beings are storytellers. I really love this expression. Human beings are storytellers. From childhood, we hunger for stories just as we hunger for food. Stories influence our lives, whether in the form of fairy tales, novels, films, songs, news, even if we do not always realize it. We are all invited to become storytellers. Stories, in fact, we know that stories cry out to be shared. These stories cry out to be recounted and brought to life in every age, in every language, in every medium. So we know that storytelling is an irrepressible element for the for human beings. So therefore, presenters are going to talk about this art of storytelling. And this is also a topic of formation. As we know, Michele has this experience and he's really in formation for storytelling. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to Professor Michele, and he's going to introduce this topic that he prepared for us today. And the title is We Are Made of Stories. So we have to keep in mind that we should speak slowly. I know I'm very aware, and this is a great recommendation because usually, as you know very well, I'm used to run when I'm speaking. So, hello to everyone, and it is really a reason for emotion knowing that I am greeting you from my house and I can reach everywhere in the world. I feel really as a tiny human being. But anyway, at the same time, I also feel that I'm not that tiny because I am in a family environment as somehow I had this opportunity in my life to meet many religious orders, women religious orders, and collaborate with them, starting from the Pauline sisters, but also we mentioned earlier the daughters of the helper of Mary, and I am a Salesian professor, and I have been working with many orders, which I could mention right now. People are saying it's impossible to know all religious orders. Well, of course, I don't know all of them, but many of them. And I can tell you that today I feel in a familiar environment. So, welcome everyone, and I would like to begin this presentation. I really love this topic I'm introducing today, and I'm particularly happy for the decision of Pope Francis to dedicate his message to storytelling because I love storytelling, and particularly I love telling stories, and I will explain to you the reason why I like that. I would like to start with a quote from William Shakespeare from The Storm. So from the fourth act, the first scene, it says, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep." So this is what William Shakespeare wrote. He was really a great playwright in the theater, and I would like to add, trying to be humble as well, something that says, "We are such stuff as stories are made on." And the fact that we are made of stories is something that is shown by the story. If we try to go back in the past, if we try to transfer to one of those grottos of the Paleolithic, I don't know if you remember what was on the walls of these grottos. We had graffiti, for example, with men with arrows, and they were hunting. And if we try to do this again, if we go back to the ancient Egypt, we all saw pyramids and hieroglyphs, and these were drawings that try to transmit a message. That also is a way of communication. If we try to also think of ancient Rome, in Rome, exactly, if you wander around, you can find Trajan's column or even many other monuments. And often there are some images on these artworks. And through those images, the purpose was telling stories. What does this mean? It means that man has always been feeling the need to tell stories since when they appeared, since when he was born, and in the Paleolithic, in ancient Egypt, and he was always trying to tell stories, also in ancient Rome. So there has always been this constant need. Therefore, it is good when the Pope says that together with the need for the basics, for the primary needs, eating and drinking, there's always been the need to tell stories. But therefore, we can analyze our day, for example, and what do we do? Well, we know, for example, that we watch TV or we listen to stories, we watch the news, and of course, these are news, but are stories. Or we go and see movies, we go to the theater, but we are, for example, meeting friends in a cafeteria at home, and when we are together with them, we are telling stories. So try just to imagine for a moment during your day how many stories are present in your life. All the stories that you are listening, or, for example, those you are telling. If you even just look at the picture, that is a story. And therefore, in our daily life, we spend most of our day living of stories. So perhaps someday, I don't know, we won't get to visit a place physically, but every day we do these primary things like eating and drinking, and we have at least one story that has been told to us or that we are telling. So we are made of stories. And which is the reason why we are made of story? These stories that are coming to us or are coming out of us are leaving a sign, and this sign can be positive or negative, and this is staying with us. That is why we are made of stories. When a child is asking us to tell a story, he's asking, please tell me a story, or perhaps tell me a tale. And he is telling me, tell me is made, of course, of tell and me, which means tell something to me. And we have this way the two pillars of storytelling. They are from one side telling a story, and the other side the person who is listening to us. Therefore, storytelling is kind of a bridge, a passage of information, and we need someone. Of course, we can write a book, for example, on our own, but that book is going to be read and is going to reach many people. And this is another mean of communication. So this telling me is not something minimal, on the contrary, is essential. And why we can say that? Because first of all, is transmitting the essence that I should be able to tell a story. If we tell a story to a child starting from a tale, for example, we start with Cinderella, and we add something that is coming from other tales, we are putting together different tales, and the child might stop us. And on the other side, together with the technique of telling stories, we feel the need of making us understood, being able to be understood and know who we have in front of us. If I ask you, for example, to tell what we are doing today, this afternoon, to a child or to an adult, are you going to do the same? No, not in the same way. Of course, you would be using different words or a different way of speaking or different examples. And why? The reason is that it depends on who we have in front of us. So in the telling me means that this is essential. The me is essential. Who is the person who is receiving our story? So we need to know the way we are going to tell this story, but also what is the target audience, who is the person who is listening to us, and be aware that the person listening is the symbol of the knowledge of people we are meeting, but also the responsibility of what we are saying, what we are telling these people. And this is obvious, as Pope Francis reminds us, be aware. We know stories, we are telling stories, but since the very beginning, there is evil as well that tries to enter in these stories. So be aware of this element, responsibility. Why do we use stories so much? We can say that we use stories because they allow to find a way to identify when we read a book or we are watching a movie. Sometimes it's an adventure movie. We are trying to see, pay attention, and this is something that is shocking us. We are almost jumping because we are identifying. We are really identifying with the characters of these stories. And this is an essential element because it's based on feelings. And this is not something that is necessary, since we can also decide that we're not going to identify with the story, but anyhow, that story, even if we are not aware of this, is helping us to have an idea on this story and give an opinion, which can be positive or negative. And therefore, we can affirm that a story, even if this does not allow to identify, somehow is inviting us, almost obliges us to have a reaction. And therefore, stories are essential since they become a way to transmit feelings and the critical point of view in which we are going to identify and recognize ourselves. This is the point of strength of our stories, and this is where the value of literature is. The strength of stories is touching the soul of people and making it eternal. And we are acknowledging ourselves in these stories, our feelings. And this is why we tell stories. The ancient Greek also is presenting many important stories of Antigone, for example. How many times today we find a character of Antigone from ancient Greece, even on newspapers? For example, we know the novel Antigone. Antigone also is another example. Stories reach us in a very deep way, and they are living in our daily life. And therefore, stories through immediation, through identification, have a strength, and is the strength that we can acknowledge very well. How many of you were able to be moved watching a movie? This is also the strength, is the strength of a story. I know it is something fictional, the fiction that is showing us the characters, but we are able to cry or smile because this is the strength of the story. And even if the story, of course, has a story, has a strength, the strength when it is exercised becomes something that is powerful. So we can say that stories can go from the strength to become powerful. And I give you an example. Se noi proponiamo, if we are giving an example for children of a story, for example, for a young girl will have the desire to have a doll that is representing the character of that cartoon. And if the story of the character of the story becomes a book, the child would like to have the book, and therefore stories have a power that is going toward different direction. It's not only the power of one story that is told. There is a series of potentials and potential elements that is going towards different sectors. For example, from a cartoon, we can have the power for a movie, for example, or the strength for it to become a book, so for a publishing house. So it can have so many different ways for the merchandising, which is another aspect of stories. And therefore, I can say this was an example for children because this is the the easiest example, since many enterprises and businesses are trying to look at storytelling, since their product is not something that must be bought only, but they must tell their story, because if the businesses tell story, then they are allowing also you to choose it with great enthusiasm. And therefore, many businesses are using storytelling, and they are sharing storytelling through their products. They are trying to do so through, for example, advertising, and for example, other pictures which are telling a story, a story that shows identity as well. So, of course, stories, as we understood in a simple way, they have a power. Since they have a power, they also show responsibility. And since what we say has an impact, and the impact can be economic, social, and also of values. For example, now we have many fake news at the present time, and they are on social media. They are very present. They are news that are not true, or for example, they are told in a different way, and those fake news are somehow told. And therefore, on the other side, we can have people who are able to have a critical spirit in front of these stories and understand that they are not true. But there can be also people who do not have this kind of critic spirit, and therefore they can think that these are true stories. and that news on the human soul is determining an idea which is building a value, and therefore a fake news is contributing to create a wrong idea on some topics, and this is a value system that is going to be polluted, we can say. And so that we can say, if I say a story that is not true, saying I'm not saying something true, I'm just inventing, but if I try to show this story as true when it is not true, I'm trying to confuse the person who is in front of me, and therefore this is essential. And another step I would like to show you is also what concerns the aspect of being a story. Why are we a story? Stories are living signs on us. And I would like to give you an example now. You are religious women, and each of you possess a story. And a story of each of you has been somehow addressed also through the story that you chose. For example, your orders, you know, they have founders, and the founders gave you some guidelines, and therefore you decided to embrace that story, and somehow you became representative and storytellers for this, because you are continuing to live that story. For example, with Pauline's sisters, I can tell you, Sister Pina, who is with us today, she is organizing this reality because she's coming from a reality which is very much towards communication. So her story is oriented in the field of communication because she decided to embrace the story of her own family and her founder. And therefore, here, perhaps I should say also Alberione, I should talk about him because I would like, in this case, perhaps to communicate to how powerful he was in communication. He was a predecessor in movies, in communication, and therefore this is true of each one, every one of you. Everyone decided to embrace a story and to share it with others. And in order to do so, you need the proper means, because you should know very well your story, or on the contrary, you run the risk to communicate it in a wrong way. So you should know it very well to understand the instruments to tell the story. Many of you perhaps know that this must be done in a global conference, but others, for example, know that they have to go out and tell it to 2 or 3 people. So at this very moment, you are really the embodiment of what we say. Telling the story, and you are telling this true story, and you are connecting to the other because you know what is the external reality and to who are the people you are addressing, and therefore we are made of stories. And today we are made of story. Everyone is made of story, because if in the past, in order to tell a story, we needed an audience who had to be there to listen to us, today this is possible through social media for everyone. And when we are sharing, for example, a link, when we are publishing a picture, or when we are posting a quote, so at that very moment, we are telling a story. We're telling a story for our followers. Our followers are those who are perhaps requesting, sending us a friend request, or following us on Instagram, and we call them followers, but who are they? they are always that part of the story that is listening. It appeared something tiny, but now it's growing bigger and bigger. It's going to even eat the other part of the story. So that is the part of our audience. And when we are telling a story through social media, we are following two principles. So first of all, we show an image of us that is the one that we want to show. And then the second point is that we should keep in mind the people who are listening to us. Therefore, in that very moment, we are telling our stories, our story. At that very moment, we are sending out a message, and therefore, we need a responsible use of social media. So young people, for example, as we mentioned earlier, they are very much able to know this kind of virtual world because they were born in this reality. They learn to read books, of course, but since they were 2 or 3 years old, they learn to watch videos, and therefore they are able to read in a different way reality. Since they were a child, they were used to read pictures, for example, and for them it is essential to be able to communicate through those pictures and stories. For example, if I can say that for them, what is essential? Instagram stories are essential. Those are very short stories. They last 24 hours and they can be contained in a picture, perhaps with a quote or with a song, another kind of image with the link of the song. Sometimes my students make me smile because they speak, for example, of tactical stories. So if somebody is suffering out of love, is publishing perhaps a story with a very sad love song in order to send the specific message to one person who is going to watch the story. And what is this now? That if not telling the very present moment, the story that one is living. This is, of course, positive because young people have new ways of communication. But we have to be also to pay attention and understand that stories are not 24-hour stories, but all stories have a repercussion that can continue over years. And this is, of course, our work. And at the same time, social media are allowing us not only to publish a part of us or of what we want to share. For example, we say that the use of social media must be proper. For example, there are people who use it on a personal level. I give you a very simple example. Many mothers publish their sons' pictures. Others, they decide not to do that. So there is a very definite choice at the very beginning of this. But at the same time, we are also becoming people who listen to stories. Through social media, we are able to acknowledge and see other people's stories. And today, businesses, before they're going to hire a person, beyond looking at the resume, they are going to look and observe social media because social media are telling something of us. And I really got the confirmation of this from friends who are studying and researching this sector. So therefore, this is a sign of the element that we are creator of our stories, but others are reading our stories. So we have to be very aware and careful because this is what other people are going to see in our stories. And we are also at the same time reading other people's stories to the point that we can say we have kind of a method to show if we like the story. On Facebook, we know very well we like something that is posted. On Instagram, we have a little heart. And for example, at that very moment, we are showing that we like that story, that was very meaningful to us, and we are giving our approval somehow. And therefore, as you can see, so we go back to the child who was asking, tell me a story. This is something that has been going on throughout time. And even today, this is happening because we tell stories and people read us. So in that tell me a story, this is really huge because we are stories. We are going to tell stories in the future as well. But as Pope Francis mentioned, even the Bible stories are stories, and these stories have an incredible value, and they can really be implemented somehow in a different way in the present. We are made of stories, and we are going to keep living of stories today on social media, and who knows tomorrow, because we are going to go ahead, and we are always going to be very mindful of this. If a storyteller said 20 years ago, I'm working with storytelling, somebody would have said, what does this mean? But today, if I say I'm working with storytelling, perhaps other people are aware of what that is. Perhaps 50 or 70% people are going to understand. So stories have a power, and man discovered this power and is going to use it. So we have to understand how to use these stories, and in which case and through which kind of site we are going to read other people's stories. So we create stories, we listen to stories because we are made of stories. And so we have to look at our target audience, our followers, our readers somehow. And therefore, yeah, Shakespeare, as I said at the very beginning of my introduction, I say we are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. And today, who knows? Who knows what Shakespeare would have said? Thank you, Michele. First of all, because you were so much able to look and keep the speed of your presentation very slow, and it was possible to translate. And on the second level, on how you presented this topic, because this gave us so many ideas for reflection, and also for a desire to perhaps know more this reality of storytelling. And this was very much helpful to think on the topic. We say we are stories, we are made of stories, we welcome stories. And our stories in our life are building our identity. We are our story. We are the story that we lived, that we experienced, and they are very much rooted in our memory, in our daily life as well. So, also, the other aspects which are so interesting are the fact that it is important to tell stories. We need an ability to tell stories. Not everyone has this ability, but we can have a formation in this sense. And also what you said before, that we should keep we should be mindful also of those those who are listening to us. we have to pay attention to the people listening to us, because sometimes we perhaps have a language and ways that are not respectful and mindful of people we have in front of us, even in our evangelization and in how we tell the story of stories, the story of love in the Bible, the story of salvation. And of course, I hope that you were able to follow, everyone was able to follow, and I would like also to leave space for questions after listening to Patrizia Morgante, who now is going to present also something that is very specific, weaving stories on social media, that is in particular in this case Facebook.
Esatto, grazie
Yes,
Pina.
thank you,
Yes,
Pina.
I'm moving in
And
the English
now
room.
I will move to the English room.
So English speaking people can relax a little bit, and that they can listen English, but my English that is not English, is Italian English. So thank you, Michele. I was I was completely, listening to you because you told us a story about storytelling. And I realized how much life is within the stories. And some of the comments, one of the sisters said, we are listening to stories because we are made of stories. And actually, we are stories, because all our body, all our biology tell a story. I want to share my reflection, short reflection, and I want to reflect with you on two topics, but they are connected. The first is about the words. Which kind of words we use when we tell a story. And I want to reflect on that, not in general, but as religious life, as women religious life. And the second reflection, that it will be more concrete, is how we can tell the story within Facebook. Why Facebook? Because I think that all the reality, all the entities, in this case USG, have more social media, but there is one that is like the boss social media, because we have a special relationship with it, or because our audience is there. And this is the case for UISG. Facebook, the Facebook page is our boss social media. So the first point about the words. Which kind of words we use to tell my mission, to tell my institute? In the previous webinar, we talked about nonviolent communication. It's difficult to be nonviolent in the social media, but I see women religious life reflect, select, discern the right words to say the story. And I imagine that these words are lived, experienced. We need to tell words that come from a profound source, from a contemplation time, from a space of silence, from a space of profound presence. We cannot just react. We can be proactive. We cannot just react. We have to listen, reflect, and then share our stories. Because Michele told us very clearly that the effect can be shared in different ways, and we will see better later. We used to live our faith on words. Think of the Bible. And we have been studying each word of the Bible for centuries. I'm not telling that you have to write a Bible in the social media, but we have to be very careful on the words we use. Perhaps we have to recuperate the origin of the word, of each word. There is a wonderful word in Italian that is benedizione, which means blessing. I imagine that most of the words that the women religious life share in the digital world are blessing. What I mean by saying that? Benedire comes from the Latin, dire bene. Blessing in Italian from the Latin means say beautiful things. That does not mean that we have to tell something beauty when there is nothing beautiful. But through our words, we have to allow the beauty to come up. I think this is the challenge. Sometimes things are very bad, are very sad, but through our words, we can help the beauty to come up. We can help the hope to come up. I think this is the role of religious life in the digital world, in the social media. I want to show with you now a very short TED Talk from a Nigerian woman. Her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I will share with you, it's just 4 minutes. It's in English, but there is the subtitles in Italian, so my colleague Claudia can have a short rest. For the people who muted the original, you have to unmute it because I think the audio passes through the original, okay? But I'm not sure in any case. So I will share with you now. I invite you to watch this short video and try to think what we can learn about storytelling and think on of what Michele has just shared with us.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the nature of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Laye, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination, they opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this: it saved me from having a single story of what books are. I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, live-in domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about
Okay, I think it's a very interesting spot of how a person can be victim and oppressor of stories. So I invite you, as you know, oh, you cannot actually. I will leave you now the possibility. If you want to share something on the chat, what are you learning? What do you learn from this testimony, from Chimamanda experience? What are you learning about story? Also, don't forget what Michele has shared with us. So I will wait for some minutes for you, and then I will share what I'm learning and what we can learn. So if you want to write and comment in the chat, everybody can read the chat, but I will echo something. I have to check for single stories in my mind and my storytelling. Am I inviting to embrace diversity in my stories? Good point. Maria Rosa says that stories have a power. Barbara says the old wisdom, the receiver determines the meaning of the story. That's right, interesting. We often listen to the first person who tells the story without listening to the other's version. We don't know the whole story exactly, I was impressed, says Maureen says, I was impressed by how oppressive stories can be when they exclude so many. Exactly. We are formed by the stories we hear and we read. Exactly. Okay, thank you for your comments. Please keep writing, because it's important that we say our word also about the stories. We cannot just listen. We have to find our word. What I have learned reading, actually I read in Italian, is her story, because it's written and, you know, it was easier for me. I have learned that the way that we tell the story shapes the reality of a person, of a people. So it's a personal and a social shaping. You can imagine how huge is the power in our hands. The story shapes the culture and the way we relate with the others, with the protagonist of the story. Don't forget what she said. My novels were full of white men, rich men, but she grown up in a Nigerian town where everybody perhaps was black, you know? The risk of just one story is to ignore the dignity of a person, of a nation. So we have to be storytellers, but also story listeners. We have to commit with others to create the space for people to tell their stories. Now we have a fact, perhaps one fact, one event, and many different ways to tell this fact. I want to close my first point with two questions, and I invite you to bring it with you to reflect. First question: are my conversations in social media a blessing? Are my conversations in the digital world, in the social media, a blessing? The second question: am I aware of the story that I'm telling about my institute, about my person, about my vocation? I repeat it. Am I aware of the story I'm telling about my institute, about my biography, about my culture? As I told you at the beginning, I want to share with you some ideas on how we can share stories on Facebook. Something Michele has already shared with us something, but I want to be just a little bit more specific. Facebook starts in 2004. 2004 is in the middle of the decade of the social media, from 2000 to 2010. Most of the social media starting during that decade. And it's not a casualty, but it's the decade where people move from just observing someone else's communication to interact, to modificate the communication. It's a completely shift. Facebook is a company, it's not an NGO, and whose earnings he makes money from us. through our data, through our information, through our profiles. So its goal is to catch our attention and time. The more we are within this platform, the more they learn on us. Despite that, I still think that Facebook offers us some good opportunity to tell stories. Before looking at some example, let's read these statistics. 2.41 billion of people are on Facebook. It's a continent. How a congregation can be outside this world and be willing to meet people? It's a question. Let's see some other monthly active users. It means that they enter at least once a month, but we know that it's much more. Facebook is the world's third most visited website in the world. These statistics are related to United States, but if you see the statistics per country, the average age of Facebook users is very high. Let's see some other data. Facebook users spend 38 minutes per day using the platform. It's interesting. 74% of users log in daily, not occasionally, daily. It means that we can connect with them daily. 300 million people use Facebook stories daily. It means that they publish stories. I will show you some example later on. Stories daily, because as Michele told us, the stories last 24 hours. So if I want to keep my audience up, I have to publish continuously. And actually the stories came from Instagram. Mr. Zuckerberg owns Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp. He's very smart. So now let's see how and what Facebook offers us to tell story. We have the post. Post is not just text. We can have a photo. I will show you some example. It might have a photo, video, live Facebook as we are doing right now. So it's not just text. A post without a photo, it's not much visible. Then we have the stories that last 24 hours and has a special place on the layout of Facebook. Then we have the notes. I realize USG is starting right now to use the notes, but I realize that many companies and organizations do not use notes. I found them very useful. But what the other elements are the rooms. I don't know if you see it's a new tool. I did investigate a lot, so I won't talk about that. A common element for all these spaces are the emotional communication. We have to be able, as Michele was saying, to say words that are incarnated. We are people on Facebook. We are not just a sister. We are normal people who suffer, who share joys or whatever. Let's see some example of post. Everybody knows Save the Children. This is the banner of the page. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that I'm talking about institutional communication. It means that it's the communication in the name of an organization. So for instance, the institutional communication of your congregation. But some of these tips might be very useful also for your personal branding, your personal profile. Look at here. This is the logo. This is the banner they are using right now in Facebook. I don't know what Michele thinks, and I invite him to say something if he likes. This is already a story. It's just an image, but it tells us a lot. It tells what they are doing. What are their priority right now? This is a story, just looking at the photo, the image. This is another post, always from Save the Children. Oh, sorry. Look at the, oh my gosh. Sorry. That's too fast. Look at the image. You can also consider the text that is important, but here the image is the best, is the more effective storyteller. It's so well done. So you read the text later on. First you see the image, and it says immediately, and the image how can I say that? What get your attention is more the girl than the text on the image. You see? This is a story. As I told you, a post is not just a text and an image. This is the live. Vatican News made daily live on Facebook of the prayer or whatever to accompany people during the COVID time. Here. And then the video on the live Facebook video is recorded automatically on Facebook. So you can see the variety we have to offer to tell our story. We cannot use just one channel. This is another example of post. This is the campaign Nancy Hearts. And this is a very nice post. Why? You have a text, you have a hashtag, you have the website. But what I like most are the images. I wouldn't put 3 images on the same post, but this depends on the criteria. But look at the image. I'm showing you each image. Here is saying to you why, the reason of this post. Then you see up above here, which is the name of the campaign. And up down below, you have all the logo and the website. This is an image that tells many things at the same time. The red, the color. Look at this one. This is a quotation. This is what we call technically flags. So I use the same graphic format and then I use a quotation. Another example that I like a lot, this is the call to action. Okay, sister, if you are on my Facebook, this is what you can do after reading my post. This is a call to action. We are inviting people to join our campaign. This is another thing that I like a lot. This is an infographic. This is a way to tell a story without using just text. It's not easy to do it because it takes time. You have to learn how to do it, but it's very nice. You can choose colors. You can choose some symbols, images, and text. This is very useful also for education information. People won't forget the content after reading well an infographic. And here you can easily publish on Facebook with a post explaining, a link to learn more. This is a typical stories. I'm showing you now different kind of stories that you can see up above. There is like how do you call it? A bar that flows, because you have just some seconds to read the story on Facebook. You cannot stay 2 hours reading the same story. No, it's impossible. That's why you have to be very effective in the communication. In my opinion, this is very effective. This is very effective. No, Claudia can translate. You don't need too much explanation to understand that. This is a typical story from Religious Sister, a quotation from the Gospel that it might be, but you cannot publish just that. This is nice. This is something that shows people happy, sharing something. Perhaps it's a party. I don't know. This is the story that people like and appreciate, because see religious life as normal people. This is what I usually do not like. It's just to say good morning. Sorry, I found it that is useless, completely useless, unless you send it to just one or two persons. They are friends. But on Facebook is to lose an opportunity to say something more interesting. Let's see now what is a note. This is a note, but I want to show you the note. Sorry. Directly, I don't know why I stopped sharing. Sorry. I want to show to you, and then we close, how this is the UISG Facebook page. If you see here, we are online live here. Here you have a note. This is in Italian, I'm sorry, but it's notes. Look how the note comes up. I will open it, the note, and now I invite you to observe if you recognize that you are on Facebook or it seems a blog. It seems a website. You have an image, big image. You have a title. You have the author. You have the date. You have a video in this case, but you are not obliged to do it. Then there is a text with some underline, interlines, so they have, space, a paragraph between the other. Then a photo. I can put more photo. I can put bold to highlight content. This is long, but you can do it shorter. This is a good way for congregations who do not have a website to use the notes on Facebook to share more content, to share stories. And it's very easy to do it. I want to close my reflection just sharing another question. I invite you to close this webinar. Go to your Facebook page or profile and investigate which is the image that comes up of you, of your congregation from the last 5 posts. Put in the hands, in the mind of your audience, of your readers, which image comes up reading just the last 5 posts.
Grazie Patrizia.
Thank you, Patrizia. First of all, thank you for your effort to speak in another language. And this is also something that we We appreciate. And also, thank you for what you shared. And even you share with us some tasks that we can take. And I think that these three questions are essential, especially for religious women who are called to be present. We cannot really think anymore today that we cannot be present as an institute, as organization, within social media and digital world, but we have to understand how it's not like just being there, but how we are going to do so. So I think that what you said is helping us to understand how our being on social media can be also based on emotions, and emotions are not always good when we have to communicate to someone. And you invited us in what you said to become communicators, but also that we have to possess important content to share with others. You gave the example of good morning and others, but it is hard to become good source of good in the digital world. We have to do so, and therefore we go back to Pope Francis' message, who is calling us uh, to to sue important stories, good stories, and have the responsibility to share. Patrizia, you ask a question. You ask Michele a question. I don't know if he wants to answer. Yes. Which question? I don't recall right now. Perhaps on the image. I don't really remember right now. Oh, yeah, yes. It was concerning the Facebook banner for Save the Children, which is a story in itself. Yes, of course, I share your point of view, and especially the second post you showed, the one with the young girl and the invitation for the parents during this time of COVID-19. I think that this image was really studied. The center is the eye, because at this very moment we are experiencing a new way of communication. Since we have to wear masks, we only have our eyes visible, so even the smile that was earlier shown through a real smile, now we have to see it through the eyes. And the eye of the young girl was not looking in any direction if not in front of her, as a call to be a parent, regardless of being a parent or not. So she was looking at us directly. And this is a strategy, as also shown in the previous image. There was a young person that is shown in the first place, and she's realizing some baskets with some primary goods. So it's not something different. So it is essential the example of what is transmitted, which is in itself the identity of the reality and the understanding of what is happening, and therefore is the identity of the association in association with the surrounding reality, and therefore it is really well studied. Thank you, Michele. I really, really like the question that you asked us, Patrizia. We, as religious women, we should look for images in our congregations in the last 5 posts that we shared, which kind of image we are transmitting on social media, because that is where the identity of who we are is emerging and who we are called to be. And this is an essential exercise that is responsive. It's also a way of being responsible in and being aware in this digital world where we are and where nobody can think of just living every day. So concerning this point, Pina, I would like to say that this is really an important passage of Patrizia concerning the good morning message, because if you look at, for example, a show, a TV series, and one episode you don't like it, the second one you are not going to watch it. And therefore, if every day I publish a good morning, the second day another good morning with a flower, the third day perhaps I'm not going to look at your page anymore, because we have not to be there no matter what. We have to do it in a wise way. And if you publish something that is interesting on the first day, and maybe not on the second, but on the third day, then the fifth day, perhaps I'm going on my own to go and see on your page what you published. But this is also concerning the messages. When we every morning are getting messages who is writing just good morning, perhaps we do not even open it, because we know that who is writing us for some necessities is asking something. So we give priority to people who are sending this kind of message and not just a good morning. So we have to be efficient in our presence, and this is essential as a tip that we can take into account. So thank you. I think that this is really the key to also understand how we are called as religious women to be present. Patrizia said, for example, good morning, the example of good morning, and I hope that you understand when I say that this is the same for what concerns the increasing numbers of just religious images of saints, of Jesus. This is good, of course, but on social media, this is not going to find a space of feedback, because also the language of social media is different. So keep this in mind. We are perhaps thinking that we want to share images and ideas or videos prevailing of some kind, but keep in mind that perhaps this is not the how we should be present on social media. And as people want to share a story of salvation to the man of today, to today's humanity. So women, human beings need to have not just this kind of just religious witness, but also witness of stories that give, which give sense to life. I don't know if we have any questions. We are a little ahead of time with so I think that there are many ways of thanking us and many comments on in chat, and we are going to save it and give a value to it, and we really thank you for this. I believe that if somebody has to leave because we already passed the time limit, we can close, but if somebody wants to share a comment, I just want to say that I stopped the live streaming on Facebook. So now, just for a simple and free sharing, more than questions, basically. And if somebody wants to speak and share something that is going to carry with herself after this meeting today. We had also some students from India. I don't know if they are there, if they are following, but we could perhaps listen to them and their reflection, but also whoever wants to share something with us is free to do so. You can just unmute the phone, if the microphone, sorry. Oh, thank you, first of all, Patrizia, Michele, and Pina for guiding us in this reflection. And I really bring with me a very rich word, which is discernment. Discernment is valid also for this. It is something that is giving us the opportunity to discern what is valid and what is not valid. So telling stories is really something that implies our life. And only if I'm able to tell a story, I can bring life. And this is true for each generation. And therefore, what I wish for, also through this means, we can learn how to tell stories. So thank you for this collaboration with us as well. Thank you.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. And thank you, Patrizia, and the UISG staff for the opportunity to listen to the speakers, because I am not very aware of Facebook. Sometimes I publish without being aware
Immagine di me o di la
when
congregazione?
it is my image or the image of the congregation. So I have to be very careful where I publish something, as I understand, if it's something that is telling, is sharing a message. So thank you. Sorry, because I speak Portuguese, but I want to say thank you very much, and I hope that I'm going to learn more things from you. Thank you. Yes,
You can unmute your microphone and speak directly. Nice to see Odira again.
Thank you, Patrizia.
Kathleen was the, I will tell in English. Kathleen Bryant, she's a sister from United States, and she was part of the campaign that I showed to you, Nancy Healing Hearts. And her image washing the feet of a person goes and arrives everywhere, just an image to express the commitment of the religious sisters against human trafficking. Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay.
Penso che possiamo chiudere, Pina, sì?
I think we can go towards the end of our webinar, and I would like to thank, first of all, Michele Casella for his availability and for the contribution that he shared with us, and especially for his passion that he's showing clearly in what he does and in the opportunity to live it as a beautiful life that is enriching. And also Patrizia for giving a voice to the need to share stories and to be a storyteller in a coherent way with the choice that we as women really just made. And therefore, I would like to just end this meeting. Also, thanks to all who participated. I see that you were many in this webinar, and thanks to UISG, to the Dicastery of Communication and USMI, and they really gave us the opportunity to have this kind of meetings. And before closing, I would like to take again some messages, some words coming from Pope Francis' message. At a time where fake news is increasingly sophisticated, reaching exponential levels, as in deep fake, we need wisdom to be able to welcome and create beautiful, true, and good stories. We need courage to reject false and evil stories. We need patience and discernment to rediscover stories that help us not to lose the thread amid today's many troubles. We need stories that reveal who we truly are, also in the untold heroism of everyday life. So these words should be for everyone a source of inspiration, especially to orient ourselves in this very moment and help us to find the courage in order to face these actual challenges that we are leading. So thank you everyone, and see you soon. Bye.
Grazie Michele.
Grazie Patrizia, grazie Sorpina, grazie mille a voi, a voi.
Grazie Michele.
Buonasera a tutti, grazie Pina, grazie Dina per la vostra presenza, grazie anche a Claudia che ha tradotto. Thank you very much.
Grazie a voi, grazie.